Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to ZTV Live. Today's Tuesday. What day is today? Tuesday, June 29th, 2021. I'm Susan Fleischman, and it's so nice to have you here for another episode of one of our favorite shows, Reading, Writing, and Ralph. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on our literary editor, Ralph Peluso. Ralph, welcome back.
Thank you, Susan. How are you doing today?
I am doing just fine, trying to beat the heat, staying inside in some air conditioned comfort, of which I'm very grateful for. I'm glad I'm not, I kind of feel bad for the people up in the Pacific Northwest with the terrible heat they have up there because they don't really have air conditioning up there.
Wow. Yeah, that's true, and they're getting it pretty bad. But it's hot down here. It's sweltering, but it was cool on the golf course this morning.
That's good. How'd your game play today?
It was good. I kept it on the green stuff, and that always helps.
Yeah, that is definitely always good. Great.
So tonight's guest is Vicky Moon, and she's a noted author, and she's done a lot of good stuff, including her latest work, which is the biography and a very detailed uh, a book about Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop, who was the first African American female thoroughbred trainer,
Okay, well,
and
let
quite an
me bring,
accomplishment. And she overcame a lot to
yeah,
do that.
I'm sure. Well, Vicky, welcome to ZTV Live.
Oh,
Hi,
thank you
Vicky.
so much.
How are you
Good.
today?
Well, just like everybody else in Washington D.C. area, sweltering.
Tis the season for it, right? I mean, it's typical, summer days. So thank God for air conditioning. I'm gonna let you guys take it away from here.
Thank you,
Thank
Susan.
you, Susan.
Welcome, Vicky. Good to have you on.
Nice to see you, Ralph.
All right. So I always start by wanting the audience, the viewers, to get to know you a little bit. So tell us about your background, what you did before you started writing, and some of your inspirations that led you to the biography about Sylvia.
Well, thank you for asking. My inspiration has 99% of the time had to do with horses. Okay. And so I was in school. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, and I always thought I was going to spend my life in some kind of a career around horses or horse shows or something like that. And I went to college for 1 year, took off. My parents were very indulgent. I took off to see if I wanted to do horses forever. And by chance, I was in Tampa, Florida at a very big event when my trainer, Rodney Jenkins, won something. And he grabbed me and said, "Well, come with me. I have to go to a press conference." And so I went in the room, we were at the Tampa Stadium. Okay, we didn't have as many spectators as they would have for the Super Bowl, which I've been to there, but the room full of reporters and photographers just took me away to the point that I stayed up that night and wrote a story and sent it to a horse magazine. And lo and behold, the woman lived in Beverly Hills. That was also quite captivating, writing a story for somebody who had a magazine in Beverly Hills. And then they paid me money and printed it. And that was it. I went back to college, majored in journalism, found my way to the Washington Post, and I've done all kinds of magazine stories. I've done now, I think this is my 10th book, and at least 7 or 8 of them have to do some way with horses or horse racing. I did a book on Jackie Kennedy's life and what the horses meant to her. But Ralph, you'll be happy to know I did equestrian style coffee table, but also golf style, which
Oh, wow.
was from the fact that I followed my husband around to the British Open and the Masters and everything else, and went to the homes of some of these famous golfers.
Right. The viewers may not realize that your husband is famous in his own right. He's a renowned sports writer from the Washington Post, Len Shapiro. So that's why I imagine you were at those tournaments. But,
Exactly.
well, let me ask you a question, though, getting back to Fort Lauderdale. So you live down in Fort Lauderdale. Every spring, you get this horde of collegians coming down. How did you feel during that period? Did you get over to
How
the
did I
elbow room?
feel?
That's the real question.
Yeah, well, as I have said before, I was just a little bit too young to participate. So I had to watch, from the sidelines, or if my mother or father would give me a ride down A1A. But I distinctly remember one day my father told me that the nurse who worked in his office, was late because all those kids along there by the elbow room picked up her MG and put it on the sidewalk facing the other direction. That I have never forgotten that. And so Fort Lauderdale is forever known for that film, Where the Boys Are.
Yeah, it will be always. So one of the books you wrote about was a cookbook, right? So
Yeah.
I was curious when I saw that in your background. So how do you go from a cookbook to a detailed uh, historic biography about Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop? How does that transition occur?
You know, with each book that I have done, the transition has presented itself to me. I didn't go looking for it. I did that cookbook when uh, I I had some help from my husband. Well, he was still at the Washington Post, but I started a newspaper slash magazine called Middleburg Life. Okay, and I knew that they sell more cookbooks than the Bible. I don't know how to tell you this. Okay, so I
Wow.
gathered recipes from all the well-known people in Middleburg, probably including your friends, the McMahons, and put it into a book. And at that time, since I was like in business, I had several businesses, the bank and some other shops, like bought the back cover of it as if it were hardback or some kind of printed magazine. And so that was my first foray into publishing. And after that, I think the next one I did was called the Middleburg Mystique, and there was a picture of Jackie Kennedy on the cover with her daughter Caroline on the pony Macaroni, and she was holding her son. It was a very iconic photograph, and it's somewhat of a tell-all, but not, because I have a wicked sense of humor, and so the humor comes out. The only one who didn't laugh at the time, but is a very good friend now, was Robert Duvall, because his wife had tiptoed off with the pool boy, but he has a beautiful wife now and enjoys the countryside out here full time.
Yeah, you have some terrific neighbors out there in Middleburg, and
Yeah.
it's always a fun place to visit. So you're Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop. You know, um, I'm going to ask you to explain how you came to pick her, or why you came to choose her.
I
But
think
I'm also
I
going to
think
say
she picked me.
she picked you.
Here's how it went. Are we okay?
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
that Middleburg book, and then two or three others were published by a woman whose offices were near Dulles Airport. It was called Capital Books, and so we just kept going, and we had a deal verbally to do a book on women who love horses. But okay, I'm very talkative, and I'll talk to anybody, and I'll ask them anything. And I was in a line one day out here in Virginia, in Marshall, Virginia, to get a cup of coffee. And I started talking to the man in the line with me. And it turned out, he was a horse guy from Charlestown, West Virginia. And his relative was this woman, Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop, the first Black woman to train racehorses. So 2 days later, I went to Charlestown to meet her. I went back to my publisher and said, look, this woman needs to be the whole book. and she did not agree with me. So I kept, she allowed me to keep a small advance because the Middleburg Mystique to this day has sold 26,000 copies. That's from a town of 1,000 people. So you tell me.
Wow.
And so I set out to do the book only on this one woman. I went to meet her over and over, like the Tuesdays with Maury, but within 5 months she died. But she had written out a list for me, told me who to talk to, but there was a lot of research to be done to track down every horse she trained and every person who owned horses that she trained.
Right. It's a fascinating book and a detailed history of Charlestown, which I found fascinating as well. I'm going to ask the first trivia question of the night, so we'll get our audience geared up. And remember, as soon as you think you know the answer, type it into the comment box with your name so that Susan Fleischman can pick it up and get it across the screen. So the first question is, which Triple Crown race had the first Afro-American jockey to win? So which Triple Crown race had the first African-American jockey to win, and who was that jockey? So Sylvia faced a lot of hurdles in her life. And in reading your book, it seemed to be a combination of two things, one racial and one gender. So talk on both of those issues for a moment.
Yes. Well, of course, she had to endure all types of horrible slurs just simply walking her horse from the saddling area out to get on the track. Just think of the worst words that you can, that I won't repeat. Let's see what this blankety blank woman is going to do today. But it rolled off her back, and she was truly, truly devoted to the care of her horses. That's not always true, as you know now today. So but it took me a long time. I spent almost 15 years doing the research, and it wasn't until 2 years from publication that I figured it out. It had every bit to do with the fact that she was a woman, because then I have women friends who worked there and told me stories that have happened in the past year or so because they're women.
Right.
So you tell me which is worse.
Yeah. I don't know. In reading the book, it was hard to come to a conclusion as to which was worse. They're equally as bad, but she had so much to overcome. It was just incredible. But when you go through each chapter, and as life changed, you related it to Charlestown's history, and Charlestown seemed to have a ton of history going on with it. And so talk a little bit about the Charlestown history and some of the things we may not know about it, but we'll find out in the book.
Yeah. Well, that's every bit as captivating as anything. And that's like, I could live there almost if Middleburg, wasn't so ingrained in me already. But of course, I assume that everyone knows that the town itself, Charlestown, is named for George Washington's brother, Charles. And the streets there are Mildred, George, whatever. Okay, so we start with that. And there's the home of Charles Washington there. And on top of that, there are something like 70 or 80 members of that family buried at the Episcopal cemetery there in Charlestown. But for me, the thing that just takes my breath away is the fact that the courthouse there, that is just iconic with it's brick with these pillars, and this is where they tried John Brown. And you can go there now. You can see the room where they held his trial, and across the street where now the post office was the jail. And then they made him ride on the wagon on top of his coffin to the place where they hung him. You can see the wagon, okay, and you can drive up the street to the spot where they hung this man. I mean, how much closer can you get to history than that?
Wow. Yeah. Incredible. And that's just one of the many, many historical stories and historical facts you have in the book. It's just fascinating reading. And found out a lot that I didn't know, which is good. uh, and it's just, it's charming to read about a small town and realize how much actually took place there. You know, and when you describe the scene with John Brown and being forced to ride on the casket that they're going to put you in after you're hung, that's about as cruel as it gets, I would think.
Indeed, yes, indeed. And then nearby, it's about 4 or 5 miles away, is Harper's Ferry, which by now we all know was as a pivotal point. But when Sylvia finished, of course, the schools were all segregated. She went to a black elementary school, and then in those days, high school. There was no place for her to go other than Harper's Ferry. They had a college there called Store College, which was all black. So she went there. Unfortunately, she didn't finish because she was so pulled, and I know the feeling, so pulled to get back to the racetrack and get going with a career.
Right. Well, since we're on Sylvia, her family life was very intricate as well. She had some enormous amount of brothers and sisters, and also she lived primarily with a faux family, I guess. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that is. I don't. It's not really complicated, and perhaps in those days it wasn't that unusual. There were 17 children, so she was sent to live up the street with a very well-to-do husband and wife that did not have children. Okay, I think he had a daughter from his first marriage, but together they didn't have any children. Now, Sylvia's mother was a midwife, and I can't say, if the couple ever attempted or had any children and something went wrong, but they were completely enamored with Sylvia to the point of when they died, they left her their big house. Okay. She got everything. And
Wow.
I can remember one of the sisters said to me, "Oh, she had a bike." Okay. Because with the 16 that remained back, with the birth parents, there's no bike involved. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So it is. It's kind of an interesting story, interesting life when you read about it, and from there she connected with horses, and talk about that, how she connected and what got her started down
Okay.
the path of training thoroughbreds.
All right. Well, two of her sisters were married to two brothers who were horse trainers. I can remember the names, and I met some of these sisters too. But when I came to Washington, if I have anything to do on Saturday and Sunday, I would drag a friend from Washington. Let's go to the races in Charlestown, and you would see the last name of the two men that were trainers, Barry. Okay, and so that was Sylvia's introduction. She went and hung out with one or both of those men who trained horses and got a job, just like everybody else does to this day. You learn by walking hots, cleaning the stalls. The method of, getting to the winner's circle is the same to this day. The only thing that I objected to in the very brief time that I worked at the racetrack was back then they did not believe in a wheelbarrow or a hose. They wanted you to muck the stalls and put it in a muck sack and throw it over your shoulder, okay, and carry it to the muck pile. and to fill up the water buckets, by carrying the water to the stalls. It's not for me, but for everybody else who stayed, that was fine. Okay. I'd rather be at my computer or whatever, or riding my own horses. But that's how you learn. And that's how Sylvia learned. And in the beginning, they wouldn't even let her apply for a license to train horses. So she was behind the scenes, and the husband that she was married to then, her first husband, would be what they now call the program trainer. He had a license and he was listed as the trainer, but he was not calling the shots. I mean, if you were ever to meet this woman, you would know darn well that she was calling all the shots of how the horse was going to be trained.
Yeah, we have a picture of Chalky, which is one of her first horses that were successful, I imagine.
Right. And some of her brothers are in this photo, and the woman, the older woman in front, that's her mother. And Sylvia's right there behind. The thing I loved about this story of Chalky, it reminded me of when my parents bought me, my first nice show horse, Chestnut. And to this day, my heart beats for a Chestnut. And when Sylvia told me how when they brought this Chalky out, and the chestnut color, and how, the sun just hit it just right, I could definitely understand that. And this mare went on to win many times for her. And then she was bred, still owned by Sylvia, and had babies. And some of those babies went on to race.
Wow. That seemed to be her favorite. In that time period, though, with Chalky, she developed a relationship with three men. One by the name of Gilpin Palumbo, who I think was the jockey in that picture, and herself. And I call them a triumvirate. Expand a little bit on their relationship and how they all fit together.
I will. Well, Tyson Gilpin was one of the most highly, there he is, so tall right there. And on the far left is his son, who I connected with, Tyson Jr. And I should point out there on the far left, the second woman is his daughter, Tyson Gilpin's daughter, Drew Gilpin Faust, former president of Harvard, and in her own right, a great journalist. But so Tyson went on to become the president of the sales agency Fazek Tipton. They have some wonderful sales there. And then they teamed up with this well-known jockey, Sam Palumbo, okay? And during 1962, August, they went to Bel Air Racetrack, now closed, but another very well-known half-mile track. And then 5 days later, they won again at Charlestown. And then they went to Timonium, third place. And then it came time for like the biggest race of this woman's and this horse, Bright Gem, a career, which was to be held at Shenandoah Downs, which was right across the street from Charlestown. And so Sam Palumbo, one of the most prized jockeys of the era or ever, said, I can't ride your horse that night. I've taken another ride. Okay. So they got Carl Gambarella to ride the horse in what was known as the Iron Horse Mile. Okay. And they won. Okay. But the newspaper, I think you noticed this, when they reported on the race, they reported that Palumbo was, I don't know, second or whatever. It wasn't anything about who won it. There was no picture that, like, we saw in the winner's circle with Sylvia or anything like that, because the newspapers back then, they didn't print anything about the African Americans who lived in the area.
Yeah, it was quite eye-opening when I read that in your book, that she wins a race after the jockey's replaced or quits, and she has to get a second jockey. And they talk about the second place horse. And
Right.
I
And
can't
excuse
tell me
me,
what she felt like. She must have felt like in that
Eddie
not getting
Arcaro
ring.
Eddie Arcaro presented the trophy. I mean, what more news do you want? That picture that showed the brothers and the sisters and the trophy and the owner and everything, that was it. I mean, I've been worked at the newspaper. My husband works at the newspaper. This picture right here, okay? Can you see? There's Eddie Arcaro presenting the
Right,
trophy to Sylvia, the biggest moment of her career, and they don't cover it.
right.
Uh, amazing,
Did
amazing.
you
But
have
we got it.
did you have a chance to talk to her about that moment and how she felt?
Oh yes, absolutely. It was a beacon of light in her career, and this man Tyson Gilpin made it happen. Okay, it wasn't just that horse. I mean, that was the biggest race she won, but she trained at least 15, 20 or more horses for Tyson Gilpin, who, if you go around the racetrack anywhere and you mention that name, everybody knows who you're talking about.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. So she's getting notoriety on a smaller circuit, some of the smaller venues. Why did she never get a shot at the big time?
Well, she did go to, uh, she raced occasionally at Pimlico, but it wasn't in the cards. And of course, you have to have a super duper. She did have some super duper horses that just didn't happen. And she never, in all the conversations, expressed any regret of not going to the Kentucky Derby or, the Preakness or anything like that. I mean, in her mind, this was a great thing to get to the winner's circle where she did.
That takes a lot of fortitude on her part not to have any animosity, uh, in those situations. So a lot of credit to her. And we have a winner on the first question. So Susan,
We do have a winner, and thank you for playing the game. Peter Marino won, and he correctly guessed the Kentucky Derby.
hey, Peter Marino, good job. He's uh, he's out here in Heritage Shores where it's happening.
Excellent, excellent. Well,
He's a
thank you
good
so
friend.
much, Peter, for playing. And send us a
So
PM, a private message with your mailing address, and we'll get you a signed copy of Vicky's book.
great. And with that, Vicky will ask the second question of the night, the second trivia question. Go, Vicky.
Yeah. And I had written about the starting gate designed by a man named Hewitt. And so the question is, what was the first Triple Crown race to use the Hewitt starting gate?
So we should get an answer pretty quick because there's only three guesses. So, uh, explain
There
how
you go. Yeah.
explain how the Pewitt Gates started to change racing.
It was that the gates sprung open in the front. Okay, I mean, and even before that, I'm sure and anybody who knows racing, it used to be, with just a long rope, and they'd drop the rope or pull the rope on, off they would go. And one thing about this particular gate was that it it was one piece. It was one gate. And occasionally, you will see in the Triple Crown races that they have to use two gates in order to accommodate the 20 horses.
Now, one of the things we have seen recently in the thoroughbred racing, and of course, most of our people like myself, we focus on 3 or 4 races a year, the Triple Crown races, and maybe Saratoga, 1 or 2, and maybe the Wood Memorial, but very limited. And of course, with the suspension of Baffert, a lot of was written about illegal substances. And in Sylvie's day, she used to do, I think, something called a milkshake, as you described in your book. So explain how we've gone from maybe substances back then to where we are today. What's changed?
Well, two things. First would be the technology of creating. Do we want to say bigger and better drugs? Well, there are bigger and better drugs. There's a bigger and better vaccine right now, and then on top of that, they fine-tuned the testing. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. So the
Yeah, in
testing's good, and it's harder to hide,
Sylvia's
I guess.
day,
Yeah.
um, I can read from this book about 6 hours before the post time that the horses would receive a milkshake that they believed would boost the stamina, a mixture of 16 ounces of sodium bicarbonate, water, sugar, and electrolytes. Uh, Shot up their nose, for lack of a better phrase. You don't want me to take too long reading this. And Sylvia added tang. I doubt she was the only one to add the tang, but it was useful beyond the astronauts. Okay. And it wasn't banned. That milkshake was not banned until the 1990s. So it was perfectly legal, Mr. Baffert.
Back then, and not now. But I found it amusing that vanilla shake, some Tang, and a Gatorade, and I could enhance my performance.
Yeah. Well, try it when you're out there trying to putt. Okay.
Yeah.
See if you can hold your putter still.
Yeah, I'll try that next time and see how it works out. But there was a lot going on. And then there's some interesting stories that you have in the book. And one that fascinated me had to do with Jack Dempsey Weaver, and who was a gambler. And describe what went on, because the IRS was on his case, and he stared them down in the end. So explain that whole situation.
This is one of the fun stories, and how much I love, tracking things down. But I could see it on the chart that the horse, they had like this, what did they call it? A twin double. You bet on the second and third, or the first and second race, and then the fifth and the sixth race for the winner. And then, you may or may not come out, with a jackpot. Well, this man was from Culpeper, Virginia. And I tracked down his son, connections. Somebody said, oh, we'll call him, the family used to own the Oldsmobile dealership. But this man would drive from Culpeper, with all his numbers that he was going to bet, and go up to the races. And he won like $10,000 this day on the twin double. And so then the IRS comes knocking on his door, and they want to collect the taxes on that. And he has his son go downstairs and get this big basket, wait a minute, of losing tickets. Hello, I got my losing tickets here, to go against the winnings, and didn't have to pay one thin dime. And his son that I spoke with told me that he remembered the day exactly, and that his father bought him a baseball glove. It just touches me.
It's quite a story, because when the IRS comes knocking, that's kind of a last resort for them, and they're looking to either collect taxes or put you in handcuffs.
I've known many people to save their tickets for just that reason.
Yeah,
my mother was one of them.
Well, it also goes to show you that even though you may have won $10,000, you lost $10,000 along the way.
Exactly. Yes.
So let's get back to Sylvia. And in looking back at her history and what she did in the thoroughbreds, how did she influence and affect the training tactics for thoroughbreds, as you see it?
Well, I would just blankly say more people should have followed her her program, okay? Because with Sylvia, and this is a beautiful photo here in Cumberland. Oh, what a gorgeous place! But she led with kindness. She was always talking to the horses. Uh, okay, they got the milkshake now and again, but they never were treated badly or, asked to run if they were sore or anything like that. And that to this day is what impresses me about her. And we haven't even gotten to the part that her grandson now trains. And when I first met him and saw him, walk into the stall with one of his horses, it was as if his grandmother was speaking the way he speaks to his horses. You don't hear that. You mostly see people slapping them around, yanking them around, and blaming the horse for something that they shouldn't be blamed for.
Yeah. But in her day, the horses she trained um, raced a lot more frequently than you would think. In
Yes.
today's environment, you get uh, a high performing, uh, grade one stakes level thoroughbred. Uh, they're not racing nearly as much as they did in the past. And why is that?
What do you
Is
think?
it the money?
I mean,
Is it the money?
sometimes it's like 4 or 5 times, and they're to the breeding shed. At least
Yeah.
the male horses are. But that was the way of the world. I mean, it wasn't. It was not unique to Sylvia. But I went back and I got the charts on every single horse. That's what took me so long that she ever trained, and some of them are like 3 inches thick with 150 races. Okay, and
Right.
sometimes, once in a while, they would run in the afternoon and again at night, or run at night and again, the next night or whatever. Yeah. See this name here, John E. Berry, that's
Yep.
her brother in law. But the man next to her, right there, that's her first husband. So,
Wow.
but she was calling the shots.
So is it that, like, as we see with pro athletes in other sports, there's so much money at stake, they risk zero when it comes to putting them on ice for a long time. So they're much more cautious, and we see the same thing with the top end thoroughbreds.
Now, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Is it the money that's causing the infrequency of the top end thoroughbreds to be raced now?
No, no. It's the fact, the philosophy that they need a longer rest period in between. Yeah. Nothing else. Yeah. And so if you have a good one, you want them to be fresh for the next big grade one or triple crown or whatever. I'm surprised that some of them are so quick to say, well, we're not running in the second leg. See, I would be greedy at that point, but you know, they're going for
Right.
what's best for the horse.
Yeah. Well, and there's more money in the stud fees, I guess, than risking an
Sure.
injury. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But interesting. So, Sylvia's legacy, what do you think?
Um, I think I know my husband is nominating her for the Hall of Fame, but the process it could take as long as 2 years. We were immediately in touch with them about it, and she would be what is known as a legacy. It wouldn't, is that correct, Lenny? He's only across the room. Sorry. They only do that type of honor like every other year or something. It's not like all the other categories for the Hall of Fame, okay? And it wouldn't be because she's a woman or because she's black. It's like a historical type of thing. But I mean, there are definitely other women in the Hall of Fame, but this one has to go down in history.
Yeah. Now, what can people do to help that process along? Is there anyone that
Oh,
folks can
I
write
wish
to?
Sure. I don't know what that is right now, but definitely we'll post it. And it's there's a committee that will vet it, and we will certainly have every single thing available in my archives to back it all up.
Yeah.
And the fact that she trained for Tyson Gilpin doesn't hurt.
Yeah, that's true. So hopefully she'll get in, and if she does get in, we'll know why.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And
So,
please come with us. We're going to go to
yeah.
Saratoga this year anyway.
Oh, you are? Okay, good. I've never been up there, but I've always wanted to go, so it's kind of on the bucket list. And
Okay.
maybe this year it'd be a time to take a trip up there. It's not too far away. So what's next for Vicky Moon? What's on your agenda?
I didn't expect anything. Okay. Because, after 15 years with Sylvia, I was a little bit burnt out. And I thought, well, maybe this is it. But two things that I'm not going to jinx have come to me, or, presented themselves to me. And so we'll see. I need a contract.
But maybe you'll do another cookbook.
Thanks a lot. Maybe I will, especially since it sells more than the Bible. Okay.
Well, Vicky, thanks for coming on. You've been a tremendous guest. It's a wonderfully written book. It's full of history, full of stories, and you can't help feel for Sylvia and what she had to go through in her life. It was tough for everything she did along the way. So thank you for coming on.
I thank you both so much. It's such a pleasure to even speak to people who know about horses and racing.
Well, what a wonderful conversation, Vicky, and she really does sound. I'm so glad you've told her story, because what a trailblazer she was, and hopefully I wish you luck, and let us know how readers or viewers of the show or readers of her book or fans of hers can help with that nomination process. We'd be happy to publish something in the Zebra about that and reach some people in Alexandria and hopefully take it further than that.
Yes.
Can I add one thing? It's
Sure.
called Amazon. Amazon.com, okay?
Okay. And that's where people can buy your book, right?
There you go.
Uh-huh. Excellent. Okay, well,
Very
Ralph
good.
Peluso, thank you so much.
Yes, and in 2 weeks we have a Peter Smith with the biographical novel of life in Vietnam as a photo intelligence specialist. It's a fascinating book with some great stories as well, and look forward to that one.
Terrific. Well, we'll be here. We'll be back here in 2 weeks. So, Vicky, what a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming. Ralph, thanks again for another great interview. And I will say thank you to everybody out there watching. Please be sure to tune in Thursday night. Elisa Kovacs will be back here on Make It Alexandria. And then, of course, next Monday, Steve Houck will be back with his great show, Living on Music. And we have wonderful shows next week after that. We'll have the Alexandria Harmonizers here as well next Tuesday night. So be sure you tune in. They have a wonderful video coming up for the 4th of July. Until then, remember to be the good news in someone's life.